Some stories aren't just about what happened, but about what was left behind. Some mysteries are so complete, so perfectly sealed in time that they become something else entirely, a legend. This is Chronicles of the Obscure. Imagine a place deep in the heart of Bavaria, Germany, a landscape of rolling hills and dense, dark forests. It's the spring of 1922. Life here is dictated by the seasons, by hard work, and by the rhythms of the land. On a remote plot, isolated from the nearest village, sits a farmstead called Hinterkaifeck. For days, no one has seen any sign of the Gruber family. The postman noticed the mail piling up. The children, 7-year-old Cecilia and her 2-year-old brother Joseph, haven't been at school. At first, the neighbors assume they've gone to visit relatives. But as the silence stretches, a quiet unease begins to ripple through the community. On March 31st, a small group of neighbors decides to investigate. They walk the lonely path to the farm, the trees of the nearby woods looming like silent watchers. They find the farm eerily quiet. The front door, surprisingly, is unlocked. Stepping inside, the scene is unsettlingly normal. The kitchen table is set for a meal that was never eaten. The stove is still warm to the touch, a ghost of recent activity. But the house is empty. The family of 6 Andreas and Cecilia Gruber, their widowed adult daughter Victoria, her 2 young children, and the new maid Maria Baumgartner, who had arrived only hours before, are all gone. The search party moves from the house to the outbuildings. It's in the barn where the silence is shattered forever. There, hidden beneath piles of hay, they find the bodies. All 6 members of the household, bludgeoned to death with a mattock, a common farm tool. But this was no simple robbery gone wrong, no crime of sudden, explosive passion. The clues scattered around Hinterkaifeck pointed to something far more patient, far more methodical, and infinitely more terrifying. The killer hadn't just come and gone. It appeared they had moved in. To grasp the profound, chilling nature of this case, we have to open the evidence locker and catalog the strange and disturbing anomalies. This wasn't just a murder. It was a slow-motion haunting that preceded the violence. In the days leading up to the attack, the family was living on a knife's edge of fear. The daughter, Victoria, complained of hearing footsteps in the attic, the soft, furtive sounds of someone moving above them as they slept. The father, Andreas, found a strange newspaper on his property, one he hadn't bought and no one in the area subscribed to. He searched the farm but found nothing. Then a set of house keys vanished without a trace. He told a neighbor about these unnerving events, convinced his home had been breached, but he couldn't find the intruder. Then there were the tracks in the snow. Just before the murders, a fresh layer of snow had fallen. Andreas discovered a single set of footprints leading from the edge of the dense forest directly to the farmhouse. He followed them, his breath likely clouding in the cold air, but the trail just stopped. Crucially, there were no footprints leading away. It was as if a ghost had walked out of the woods and simply vanished into the walls of his home. The timeline after the murders is what truly elevates this case into the realm of nightmares. Investigators determined the family was likely killed on the evening of March 31st. Yet, for several days afterward, neighbors reported seeing smoke curling from the chimney of the farmhouse. Someone was still there, keeping the fire going. More disturbing still, the family's cattle in the barn had been fed and cared for. The hay was fresh, the water troughs filled. Whoever had committed this brutal act didn't flee in a panic. They stayed. They ate food from the pantry. They slept in the family's beds. They tended to the livestock with a calm, almost domestic routine. The family dog, discovered tied up but completely unharmed, showed no signs of distress, suggesting it was familiar with the killer. It was a phantom caretaker, a murderer who seamlessly stepped into the life of the family he had just extinguished, before finally, after days of living amongst the dead, disappearing as mysteriously as he had arrived. The murder weapon, the mattock, was left at the scene, and nothing of significant value was stolen. The motive was not robbery. It was something else, something personal and deeply disturbing. Over the centuries since, countless theories have been spun, each attempting to put a face to the ghost of Hinterkaifeck. Let's open our own theory board. The first and most prominent suspect was a neighbor, Lawrence Schlittenbauer. Lawrence had a complicated history with the Grubers. He had been in a relationship with Victoria and was widely rumored to be the biological father of her son, Joseph, a claim he sometimes acknowledged and sometimes denied. Their relationship had been fraught with conflict, and there were disputes over financial support. He had a clear, motive potential inheritance of the farm and an end to the ongoing personal drama. He was also one of the first people on the scene, and his behavior was noted as strange. He disturbed the bodies and seemed unusually composed. But despite the strong motive, the evidence against him was purely circumstantial. No concrete proof ever tied him to the crime. Theory 2 points to the fractured landscape of post-World War I Germany. The country was flooded with displaced and traumatized soldiers, drifters, and vagrants. Could a passing stranger, desperate and possibly mentally unwell, have seen the isolated farm as an opportunity? This theory fits the evidence of an intruder, the footsteps in the snow, the noises in the attic. Perhaps this person was hiding in the barn or attic, was discovered by the family, and lashed out in a violent panic. The subsequent staying on the farm could be explained by a simple need for shelter and food before moving on. But this doesn't fully explain the methodical nature of the killings or the seeming familiarity the dog had with the perpetrator. It feels too random for such a personal and systematic slaughter. Of course, given the eerie premonitions and the phantom-like presence of the killer, local folklore quickly filled the void. Tales of a supernatural entity, a phantom killer from the dark woods, began to circulate. This is less a credible theory and more a reflection of the deep psychological terror the case inflicted on the community. When logic fails, people turn to darker explanations. It speaks to the story's power to feel like a grim fairy tale come to life. Finally, some have considered the possibility of a family secret, that the horror originated from within the household itself. Rumors of an abusive and incestuous relationship between Andreas and his daughter Victoria had plagued the family for years. Could a hidden internal conflict have reached a boiling point, leading to murder and a meticulously staged intruder scenario to cover it up? While possible, the sheer brutality and the strange, calm aftermath make it difficult to imagine a family member carrying out such a calculated plan, tending to the farm for days after committing such an act. It doesn't align with the psychology of a crime of passion or internal rage. The case was officially closed in 1955. Over 100 suspects were questioned through the years, but no one was ever convicted. Eventually, the farm itself was completely demolished, erasing the physical heart of the mystery forever. In the modern era, forensic psychologists and criminal investigators have reviewed the cold case files, and most agree that the initial investigation was a disaster. The crime scene was almost immediately contaminated by dozens of curious villagers trampling over potential evidence. The early forensic techniques of the 1920s were simply not equipped to handle a mystery of this complexity. Today, the trail is irrevocably cold. The legacy of Hinterkaifeck is not in its scale, but in its chilling intimacy. This isn't a story about a distant, abstract tragedy. It is a fundamental violation of the one place we are all meant to feel safe, our home. It's a story where the monster wasn't just under the bed, but was living in the attic, walking the halls, and then, after the horror, sitting at the dinner table. Hinterkaifeck remains more than just an unsolved crime. It is a dark folk tale born at the dawn of the forensic age, a haunting reminder that the most terrifying puzzles are often the ones closest to us. It forces us to ask an unsettling question. How long can evil live quietly right beside you before it decides to strike? And how, after striking, can it just as quietly melt back into the shadows, leaving only silence and questions behind? What do you believe happened at that isolated farmhouse in 1922? Was it a scorned neighbor, a desperate vagrant, or something else entirely? Share your theories in the comments below. And for more journeys into the world's most compelling unsolved mysteries, make sure to subscribe to Chronicles of the Obscure. Thanks for watching.